Just in the last 48 hours, there seems to be a change in the way some British and American commentators are looking at this situation. Is it your belief that Putin is about to launch an incursion into your country?
That's what we fear, that's for sure. And it's not just us, as you mentioned, that our partners in NATO and around the globe start to understand what we've been saying for so many years, that they are coming to something. They can't just sit there, shoot over the touchline. They will have to do something. They can't keep the thousands of troops at our border. And that's what we fear, that some people were missing. I hope, and I see it now, that it's coming to understanding.
Putin makes a point, and he's made a point repeatedly, and this is a difficult one for you, I think, a difficult position for you to be in. Historically, I think the West has tended not to understand Russia or the Russian mentality, or the degree to which Russia can be a slightly paranoid and fearful country. But the point Putin makes, which I have some sympathy with, is he says, if you keep advancing NATO to our borders, we see that as a threat, we see it as a possible encirclement. And isn't the truth, Vadim, that over the last decade and more, there have been repeated conversations between NATO and the Ukraine as to whether you should join. The European Union have been pumping money into the Ukraine, and indeed, when one of your presidents was brought down a few years ago, there were people in Kiev waving European Union flags. Do you not understand that actually the Ukraine, and I can understand, if I was Ukrainian, I'd want to join NATO. I mean, I get that. But from a strategic point of view, aren't the West making a bit of a mistake in trying to drag the Ukraine into their orbit?
If you consider West, the EU and NATO, but you're right, let's talk about NATO first.
Yeah.
Let me show our perspective. In 1994, we decided to give up the nuclear weapons physically to Russia because you requested. You, Americans and Russians, signed the agreement with us that we will be defended. There were no guarantees, but assurances. Oh, sorry, we didn't understand the difference in meaning of English words. We hoped that what we got at the deal, that we give up the weapons, which actually were more than you had France and China together. So your life was much more safer since then, since 1994. And we believed that you and the United States and Russia will not threaten us with anything and will defend if anything happens to us, because we can't defend ourselves with nuclear weapons anymore. And look at us now, after all these 30 plus years, we're now in a sort of waiting until one of those ones who are signing will come to us, and the two of others who signed actually are not rushing to help us with this war. And you're right, we lost already 13 plus thousands of people.
Yeah.
So that's our perspective.
Yeah, no, I understand that perspective, but I also understand the Russian perspective. And historically, British foreign policy in the past has used the buffer state concept. Belgium was designed to be, in the end, the Germans invaded it, it caused a war. But so I do kind of understand what Putin, I'm not defending his actions, but I do understand that the ever constant eastward expansion of NATO is seen by many in Russia to be a threat, whether it is or isn't, but it's seen to be a threat. Now, overnight we learn that roughly 100 British troops have arrived in the Ukraine. We're helping provide you with more military equipment. If the situation on your eastern border does deteriorate, are you expecting us and the Americans to come and help?
Let's establish first that each and every nation has the right to defend itself unilaterally or collectively. That's in the UN Charter. So Russia has the concerns, we also have our concerns. And you mentioned historically. Historically, we also wanted to be protected. And we can be protected by a piece of paper, which signed, not just the one Budapest Memorandum I mentioned, but there are treaties between Ukraine and Russia, how they love us, how they recognize our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the rest. So we understand that they consider NATO a threat. We consider NATO as the only option for us, the only umbrella, security umbrella. There is none in our part of the globe. So that's about NATO. Or talking about your presence on our borders, this 100 people came to let our people know better the equipment we just received yesterday.
Yeah.
So their mission is quite limited. They will go back. But frankly, as a Ukrainian who is under threat, and a 40+ million nation is under threat, I would ask all our partners to help with everything they can. And believe me, I should be modest, but I also expect any sort of help, boots on the ground as well.
Now, your own army is quite considerable in size, isn't it?
It's bigger, much bigger than it used to be. 250,000 plus 500 veterans who would easily take weapons back and defend the nations. So it's quite sizable army.
It's going to be, well, look, Vadim Pristakow, thank you for coming in. If there is an invasion of your country, it's going to pose some big problems here. You know, we've just left Afghanistan after 20 years and not left it very well. This is going to be a major debate. And listen, thank you for coming in. And we're going to follow this incredibly closely because it matters hugely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.